Our next question is on invasive species, and it's a little bit surprising to read in this report. Invasive species are not something new, yet it seems like there has been very little done. You mentioned, I think, one plan for one type of carp, and yet there seems to be a very clear risk here. Can you perhaps help us understand why these departments are so far behind?
Yeah, this is a difficult one, and Sylvie just mentioned how difficult it will be for the government to deal with the subsidies on fossil fuels. Dealing with invasive aquatic species is also a very difficult issue, and it's not just Canada that's dealing with it; it's happening around the world. So these species come in through a variety of different pathways, and those are kind of difficult to monitor. But you're right that it's been a long time that we've been aware of this, and we've had, I think 3 audits that we've already done. The House of Commons has done at least 2 big reports on aquatic invasive species, and yet we still don't seem to know what species are the greatest risk for Canada, which ones we should be monitoring, which ones we should be regulating, and we don't even know really where they are. So I was disturbed by the kind of lack of information that Fisheries and Oceans Canada had to try to manage this. But I'll ask Erin to add some to that, because this is a tough file.
It is. And I mean, the federal government and other governments have recognized that it's really important to focus on prevention, because once the species becomes established and it has to be managed in place to keep numbers down, then the costs can go up incredibly high for the most damaging of species. So we've seen commitments over the years to address this. There's a United Nations Sustainable Development Goal dealing with this. Canada's committed to that, committed to an Aichi target under the Convention on Biological Diversity. And so the federal government has made strong commitments on this, but it's only recently that the Department of Fisheries and Oceans has been able to put in place a national program to deal with this. That started in 2017, and so they're still working to get some of the basic things in place that will allow them to do things like assess the risks of species in order to be able to focus their efforts on the ones that have the potential to cause the most damage.
Yeah, they also introduced a regulation at the first time on aquatic invasive species, and that was introduced in 2015. And my understanding is they just started to get money for that in around 2017, and they still don't have an enforcement strategy for that regulation. And from what I remember, there was only 1 infraction so far that they've looked at under that regulation. That's correct, eh?
Only one for Fisheries and Oceans, yes. I mean, it's the regulation empowers not only Fisheries and Oceans Canada, but other jurisdictions to take action on aquatic invasive species. So it is a step in the right direction, but it's getting all those things in place, the agreements between Fisheries and Oceans, the Canada Border Services Agency, and other partners on who's going to do what, so that when something's found, then it's triaged properly, and then also just to have the sort of the training and the procedures in place so that they know exactly what to do when they do find aquatic invasive species crossing the border.
Yeah, perfect.
I have a question here on mines and mining effluent from the public. Oftentimes, mine-related differences are approved in facility environmental assessments, and I'm told that these differences are considered effects under the MDMER. How do you reconcile these 2 competing regulatory requirements?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
So the point that the member the citizen who's writing in is making is that oftentimes mine-related differences are approved in the environmental assessments that are done on the facilities or the mine sites, and that these differences are considered to be effects under the MD-MER. And the question is, how can you reconcile these two competing regulatory requirements?
I'm not sure I'll be able to answer that really well. So environmental impact assessment is done in order to decide where a mine site could be and where it could store its waste. So that's what we do under the environmental impact assessment regulation. The MD, it used to be called MMER, MD-MER, actually deals with effluents that go out as a result of the mining activity. So I'm not sure that the metal mine effluent regulations are linked necessarily to the environmental impact assessment or the Canadian Environmental Assessment Act. What they're looking at there is, where are you going to put the tailings? What does the impoundment area look like? What's the site going to do? What are all the environmental potential environmental impacts? The MMER is about, MD-MER is about how much nickel, copper, cyanide can be let out or ejected, that's not the right word, but how much of those substances can be found in your effluent. I hope that answered that question. I don't know, Milan?
I think I'm going to defer to you with your mining background, but I mean, I could speak more in terms of the environmental effects monitoring. We know, for example, that Environment Canada and climate change, they do have processes in place, and they review, they put together plans for this monitoring. The monitoring is relatively comprehensive. After the effects are confirmed, then certain actions take place and don't take place. Now, one of the things, for example, that's done is that, as we mentioned before, is that this information is used by Environment and Climate Change Canada to inform and make decisions on the concentrations of substances going forward. And what we saw in our audit was that some of these concentrations of some of these substances were lowered in the new regulations, which came in effect in June 2018. And we also saw an addition of one other substance, unionized ammonia, and some changes to or additions to the watch list.
Right. The only other thing I can think of is that perhaps we're talking about using a natural water body as a tailing impoundment area, which is part of the environmental impact assessment, to use a natural water body. So that would be looked at, but I don't actually know how to answer that question perfectly. So I hope you're happy with it. If not, please send in a supplementary so that we can try to answer that question better for you.